The Canon M50 Mirrorless is quickly becoming a top choice camera for travel vloggers. It's smaller than a DSLR, but with all the same creative abilities. And once you start using the best camera settings for vlogging on the M50, its picture quality is pretty amazing. And since I'm often asked to share what I believe are the best video settings on the Canon M50, today I'm going to do just that. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to capture the coolest, most professional and creative shots available with this camera. And even if you're not applying this knowledge to the Canon M50, a lot of it would be useful on any Canon camera. Hi friends, welcome back to AMaeTV, where I create travel videos and provide video production instruction to help you level up your travel vlogging skills. And while I've discussed the features of the Canon M50 on this channel before, for the purpose of this video, we're going to imagine that you have the camera in hand and you're ready to set it up and start filming. And the only reason I don't have it in hand is because I'm filming on it right now. So I'll begin with camera settings. These are things you're going to set up just once before using the camera. Then we'll move into shot settings. So these things will vary depending on the lighting and the style of shot you're trying to capture. Then at the end, I'll cover a few more details like focus, stabilization, time lapse, and slow motion. I highly suggest that if you have the Canon M50, you grab it now and go through each of these settings with me as you watch this video. Also, if you'd like a handy printable PDF guide that details all of these settings, I did create one for you, and you can go ahead and grab it at amae.tv/freebies. So first and foremost, you're going to want to turn your top camera dial to movie mode, then hit the menu button to take a look at the menu. It's important to know that the options you see in the menu we're about to talk about will vary depending on what that top camera dial is set to, so make sure it's in movie mode so we're on the same page. And I do understand that you may not even be seeing this menu at all. Although it can be quite powerful, the Canon M50 is sort of built to help out beginners, and it comes with the option to use this guided menu, which sort of walks you through some things from a beginner perspective. Feel free to experiment with this, but as a seasoned Canon user, I simply cannot compute this new look. So I set my menu to the standard menu screen that you'd find in any higher level Canon camera. And I suggest you do the same just in case you decide to upgrade eventually. The menu will look the same moving forward. And to set this, we'll go to the display level menu, menu display, standard. Second, if you're in the US, make sure your camera is set to NTSC, and if you're in Europe, make sure it is set to PAL. If you're not in either of those two places, you'll just have to figure out which video format is correct for your region. This video will be based on US settings, but similar principles apply for PAL regions. So this can be found in the setup menu, number 3, Video System NTSC. It should be preset for you, but just double checking could save you a lot of confusion down the road. Third, you need to consider whether you plan to use your viewfinder on the camera or the live view screen. Canon thinks you might use the viewfinder at least sometimes, so its default setting is to turn the live view off whenever the eyepiece is covered. I find this highly annoying because I'm always accidentally covering the eyepiece while I'm adjusting the mic or covering it with my body while I'm trying to film something. So I will lose my live view display all the time. It'll just like flash on and off, and it's super annoying. So I would definitely pop into the setup menu, number 4, display settings. And under display control, I will set that to manual. This way the live view will stay on as long as the camera's active, and yes, it'll wear down your battery a little bit, but that's why you have extra batteries. Now you can dig pretty deep into more aspects of the Canon M50's menu settings to change things like manual audio settings, custom picture profiles, and customized menus. But I'm going to keep it fairly simple for the sake of this video and get you started with those settings left to default. Now let's get into the good stuff. The next main thing that you want to do is switch everything over to manual movie mode. This is really going to give you the most creative control to get the best shots possible. And don't worry, I'll explain everything once we're inside. So first of all, you want to push the shutter button halfway down to bring up the info screen. And if you don't see this info screen, then hit the info button until you do. Then hit this camera icon and select manual. Look, it's a party inside. And once inside, you can touch any of these buttons and change anything you want. And that is not the case in auto mode, which I find more frustrating than empowering. So I think we're much happier here. So the next few settings really have more to do with your shot, the brightness of your shot, and whether you're shooting in slow motion or regular motion. There's this really cool effect called regular motion, and I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to start by tapping the Q here on the upper right, and then tap this here to select a frame rate. 24 frames per second, or 23.98 technically, is your regular cinematic mode. This is regular motion. It offers just the right amount of motion blur to look like a movie, and it's what most people use most of the time. Then we've got 30 frames a second, which is a little bit sharper. Some people use that as well. And then 60 frames a second or 59.94 is your slow motion mode. Now I can't talk too much about slow motion today, but if you're interested in this, then I highly recommend you watch my video about filming the perfect slow motion, because it's a very technical type of shot that requires certain settings beyond just 60 frames a second. No matter what you choose, please select FHD, which refers to 1080p, not HD, which is 720p, which is like the resolution from 1998 or something like that. Probably not worth messing with. On the other end of the spectrum, the Canon M50 does offer 4K, but you're going to have a crop factor. It's going to crop in on it, which might not be that bad, but you also lose your dual pixel autofocus in the camera. So you kind of have to weigh like if you really need that autofocus and if you really need to shoot 4K. But for general vlogging, I recommend 1080p FHD at 24 frames a second. So the next thing you will set and forget for video is the shutter speed. While photographers might use shutter speeds for different things, in videography, the shutter speed is always set to double the frame rate. That is just the rule. And since we're shooting at 24 frames per second, the shutter is going to be set to 1/50, which is as close as it gets. So we can set this just by tapping it in, or we can use this dial icon here and actually turn the front dial to set the shutter speed. And if you want that dial icon to hop over to aperture, simply press up on the wheel and then you can use the front dial to adjust aperture. Turning the front dial is much more fun than tapping the screen, and it's one of those little things that give you that DSLR feel right here on the M50, so I suggest you give it a try. With aperture, the goal is to usually go for a smaller number, which is a larger aperture. This lets in more light and gives you a more shallow depth of field. It creates that background blur that everybody loves. Now the largest aperture on the kit lens with the M50 is a 3.5, so you definitely won't get that crazy cinematic background blur. But I do want you to know that it can be done on this camera, and again I will refer you to another video titled My Favorite Cinematic Lens, starring my little sweetheart. And actually there's a lot you can do once you start switching out different lenses, but we'll save that for another day. Still, aiming to shoot with the largest aperture you can on the lens that you have is still good practice, but the key is to make it work and still nail the correct exposure. Remember, exposure settings are like a triangle of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and because we're pretty much stuck with the shutter and we have these goals for the aperture, the only wiggle room really is left there in our ISO. And by the way, if you haven't figured it out, this meter here is letting you know exactly where your exposure is. You can't adjust this meter, but you are adjusting other things that affect this meter. So thank goodness for ISO, because this is where you get the most exposure wiggle room. Now your goal with ISO is to always use the smallest number possible. However, you may need a higher ISO if you don't have enough light. The downfall to a higher ISO is that it results in some film grain, and generally I don't recommend going over 1600 unless you have to. At this point you should really strive to add more lights or just switch up the shot. Another little video suggestion is a recent one called How to Find the Best Lighting for Your Travel Vlogs. It's about finding natural light or using some portable lights that you can pop right on your camera. That'll help you out tremendously. Now, if you do have super bright light and essentially you're trying to keep that large aperture set to where it is, you may have too much light, even if you have the ISO set all the way down to 100. This is a common problem. Then you will need a neutral density filter. So this is basically sunglasses for your camera, and it darkens everything up. They're super easy to use, fun, affordable. They're like $8. I'll link below to the one that I use. Now, part of the reason we want control over these settings rather than shooting in auto is because we don't want the camera to get out of whack simply because it's looking for a correct exposure. There is more to videography than exposure. For example, we could set the aperture to like 16, super small, right? And the ISO to 4000 for perfect exposure. But then we're inviting in this massive depth of field, and we also have unnecessary film grain there. Not good stuff. Now, I know that messing with all of these settings when you're out travel vlogging and probably just excited to get the shot can seem overwhelming. I know, because they used to overwhelm me, and sometimes I would just switch it back to auto in a crunch in my early travel vlogging days, but not anymore. The way to conquer this is just to practice. Walk around your house in different places of light and practice nailing those exposure settings in all these different situations. Make it second nature so you don't have to think too much about it. Just stay focused on your goals with each setting and then try to work to get the exposure dial where it needs to be. Now, if you sort of want to split the difference between manual settings and automatic settings, you can set the ISO to automatic while still in this mode. So if you're walking around in a bunch of different areas and the lighting's constantly changing, but you can't be like completely attuned to the settings at all times, then that might be helpful. But I would definitely keep an eye on the ISO either way, because you're going to want to know what it's doing. Moving on to a few more interesting things, we'll talk quickly about focus. So while I do use the manual mode to adjust exposure settings, I always keep the camera in autofocus for the most part. So I keep it on the face tracking And the Canon M50 has amazing dual pixel autofocus, so it always does a great job. Again, you can hit this Q to access your options. For vlogging, the face recognition works great, also for sit-down videos like this. You can also choose to focus on a particular zone or even track what you want in focus by using the box on your screen. The touch screen on the Canon M50 is absolutely golden for autofocus because you can do all sorts of fun things like rack focus, simply by tapping that screen. As for image stabilization, it's really kind of up in the air whether it's recommended to use the digital IS options that Canon offers here. I think the consensus is really that you're just better off using a good lens with the IS built into it. I do know that the digital IS will crop the image and sort of move the image around to help it achieve better stabilization, all done digitally, which can be hit or miss. So generally, I just keep that option set to disable. If you would like to test it out, you can access the options in Shoot menu number 5 under IS settings. Also, if you'd like me to make a video doing full image stabilization tests in these modes, just leave me a comment below and let me know, because I would kind of like to do that myself and see how it turns out. Another thing to point out is your option to create a time lapse with the Canon M50. You can access that in Shoot menu number 1, time lapse movie. There are 3 different scene options you can choose to fit different scenarios. And if you want to customize from there, you can alter the interval of images taken, number of shots, etc. And of course, a time lapse is a wildly fun addition to any travel vlog. If you're loving the color grade in this studio shot, wait, let's see it without it. Not nearly as fun, right? Then I suggest you check out the LUTs that I've created that I use on all of my videos to just throw on some awesome color grading. It takes a lot of the hassle out of color grading. I created them for travel videos to make you look better and to make the beautiful places that you're showing off look better. So you can learn more about those at AMaeTV/shop. And if you'd like to learn more about the Canon M50 or the Canon G7X, which is like the best Canon vlogging camera that's even smaller, continue to watch this playlist because it's all about those 2 cameras. The next video is going to compare the Canon M50 to the G7X. So if you're still on the fence, that would be a good one to watch. I'd love for you to leave me a comment and let me know if there's anything else you'd like to learn about the Canon M50, or if you have any questions about the best settings for the Canon M50 for vlogging like we talked about today. Also, if you haven't joined the Facebook group Travel Film Friends, I'd love to see you guys over there. It's a place for us travel vloggers to kind of get together, support each other, and discuss our craft. And if you'd like to learn more about travel vlogging right now, then go ahead and click any of these things that you see to watch some more videos here on AMaeTV. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!